Stellantis did not wake up one morning and suddenly decide electric vehicles were a bad idea. What happened was much more serious. The company behind Jeep, Ram, Dodge, Chrysler, Fiat, Peugeot, and more watched its American position deteriorate, watched dealers revolt, watched inventory pile up, watched customers reject parts of its product strategy, and then watched confidence in its leadership collapse. By the end of 2024, the pressure was so intense that CEO Carlos Tavares was effectively pushed out, and the company that had spent years accelerating toward an electric future suddenly had to confront a very uncomfortable possibility. Maybe customers were not moving at the speed executives expected. Maybe the problem was not that buyers needed to be convinced harder. Maybe Stellantis had simply stopped listening. Now, under Antonio Filosa, the response is enormous. Roughly $70 billion in planned spending over 5 years, 60 new vehicles by 2030, new hybrids, new gasoline models, new electric cars, new software, new partnerships, new factories. And buried inside all of that is the clearest evidence that Stellantis has abandoned the idea of forcing its entire business down one technological road. The company is bringing customer choice back to the center of its strategy. And nothing demonstrates that reversal better than one engine Stellantis itself had already declared finished. When the 5.7-liter Hemi V8 returned to the Ram 1500, buyers did not respond politely. They flooded the order books. 10,000 orders reportedly arrived on the first day. In roughly 6 weeks, demand climbed beyond 50,000. Think about what that says. Stellantis spent years talking about what customers were supposed to want next, and then one old-school V8 came back and instantly became one of the loudest pieces of market research the company could possibly receive. But to understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to rewind to 2021, because Stellantis itself was born from a strategy built around scale, efficiency, and enormous ambition. Fiat Chrysler Automobiles merged with France's PSA Group, the company behind brands including Peugeot and Citroën. On paper, the logic looked almost perfect. Take Jeep and Ram's strength in North America, combine it with major European brands, engineering resources, factories, and global distribution, and suddenly you have one of the world's largest automakers with 14 brands sharing enormous resources. Carlos Tavares took control with a reputation for cutting costs and extracting efficiency. His philosophy was straightforward: spend carefully, maximize profit from the existing lineup, and push aggressively toward electrification. At first, the numbers made him look right. Stellantis posted industry-leading margins, and investors saw a company that appeared unusually disciplined. But the financial results hit a problem that was slowly getting harder to ignore. American dealers were increasingly unhappy. Vehicles were arriving that were difficult to sell. Prices had climbed. Some showrooms were sitting on inventory customers simply did not seem eager to buy. Jeep and Ram, two brands that should have been among Stellantis' strongest defenses in America, began surrendering market share. Quality complaints became another source of frustration. More importantly, the pipeline of genuinely fresh products became thin. Stellantis had become extremely good at protecting margins, but protecting margins is not the same thing as protecting demand. Eventually, those two realities collided. By late 2024, United States sales had fallen by double digits, dealer inventories were swollen, and the board no longer appeared convinced that the existing strategy could repair the damage. In December 2024, Tavares resigned. For an automaker of this scale, that was not a routine executive transition. It was a public admission that something fundamental had broken. If a football team fires the head coach in the middle of a disastrous season, nobody assumes everything is fine. The entire point is that leadership believes continuing on the same path may make the situation worse. Stellantis now needed someone who understood both the company and the customers it had been losing. In 2025, that person became Antonio Filosa. He was not some outsider arriving with zero knowledge of the organization. Filosa had deep experience inside Stellantis and had already run major operations tied to Jeep and Ram in North America. That meant he had seen the deterioration up close. He understood the dealerships. He understood the brands. And more importantly, he understood the difference between what strategic presentations predicted buyers would choose and what actual buyers were asking for when they walked into a showroom. One of the biggest conclusions was impossible to avoid. Stellantis had committed enormous resources to an electric transition direction, moving faster than much of its customer base. That did not mean EVs had no future. It meant an all-EV philosophy was too narrow for the market Stellantis actually served. American truck buyers still wanted gasoline engines. Other customers wanted hybrids. Some wanted plug-in hybrids or range-extended electric vehicles. Some absolutely wanted full EVs. The mistake was assuming one technology had to replace all the others on one rigid schedule. Filosa began telling investors, dealers, and the public that Stellantis needed to reconnect with customer demand. Then, in May 2026, he attached a number to that reversal that made it impossible to dismiss as corporate messaging. 60 billion euros, approximately 70 billion United States dollars, invested over 5 years through what Stellantis called its Fastlane 2030 plan. That is not a minor product refresh. That is a reconstruction program. The company says it plans to launch 60 new vehicles by 2030, and the important detail is not just the total number. It is the powertrain mix. 29 are expected to have fully electric versions. 15 are planned as plug-in hybrids or range-extended electric vehicles. 24 are expected to offer conventional hybrid technology. 39 are planned with gasoline engines or mild hybrid systems. Those categories overlap because many individual models will support more than one powertrain, and that overlap is the point. Stellantis now calls this a multi-energy strategy. Translation: instead of deciding that every buyer must eventually take the same road, Stellantis wants to build different roads and let the buyer choose. That is a dramatic reversal from the previous approach. It also explains why the title of this story is not that Stellantis killed electric vehicles. It did not. Stellantis is still spending heavily on EVs. What it killed is the idea that EVs should be the only destination. Under the new plan, electric cars become one part of a much broader portfolio rather than the organizing principle of the entire company. Around 24 billion euros of the investment is intended for platforms, powertrains, and technology. Development speed is another major target. Stellantis has acknowledged that moving a vehicle from early concept to the showroom can currently take around 40 months. Filosa wants that reduced to roughly 24 months. Cutting 16 months out of a development cycle would be a major internal transformation because modern vehicles are not simple machines. Engineering, crash testing, software, batteries, supply chains, tooling, regulatory approval, and factory preparation all have to move together. Stellantis is also trying to simplify what sits underneath those vehicles. By 2030, it wants around half of its global lineup based on only 3 shared architectures, including a modular platform called STLA1. Fewer underlying platforms can reduce engineering complexity, spread investment across more products, and allow factories to build multiple vehicles with fewer expensive changes. And Stellantis is not presenting this only as an engineering exercise. North America is one of the clearest financial targets. The company wants revenue in the region to increase by 25% by 2030, while annual sales rise from roughly 1.4 million vehicles toward 1.9 million. If the overall market stays relatively flat, those extra sales have to come from somewhere. Stellantis is effectively saying it intends to win customers back from competitors. At the same time, management is targeting around $7 billion in annual cost reductions by 2028 and a return to positive cash flow by 2027. So when you hear $70 billion, 60 new vehicles, and dozens of powertrain combinations, remember what is really happening. This is not simply an exciting product roadmap. It is a financial recovery program disguised as a product explosion, and the money is not being distributed evenly. Jeep, Ram, Peugeot, and Fiat are expected to receive roughly 70% of product investment. That tells you which brands leadership currently views as the biggest engines of the turnaround. But even the brands outside that top group are finally getting attention, and we will come back to Chrysler and Dodge because their future may look very different from the last several years. First, though, Stellantis has another problem to solve. Building competitive vehicles quickly is expensive, and trying to develop every piece of technology internally is even more expensive. So the company is doing something that would have sounded surprising a few years ago. It is partnering aggressively, including with Chinese manufacturers. Stellantis has expanded relationships involving Leapmotor and Dongfeng, using Chinese engineering, production expertise, and manufacturing capacity primarily around the European market. That is a significant strategic admission because Chinese automakers have become extremely competitive in electric vehicles, particularly in cost, speed, and battery integration. BYD has demonstrated how quickly a Chinese manufacturer can scale across price segments. Stellantis could spend years attempting to recreate that expertise from scratch, or it can cooperate with companies that already possess it. Filosa's team appears to have chosen pragmatism. For now, these China-linked products are mainly focused on Europe, and steep United States tariffs make an American launch difficult. But Mexico and Canada remain interesting possibilities over time, especially because the North American automotive supply chain is so interconnected. Stellantis is also exploring cooperation with Tata Motors and Jaguar Land Rover around potential vehicle development for the United States. Again, notice the philosophy. The old automotive instinct was to control everything. The emerging Stellantis strategy appears much more willing to share cost, technology, or production when doing so gets products to market faster. That same approach extends into software. Qualcomm is involved through Snapdragon digital chassis technology intended to support infotainment, connectivity, and driver assistance systems. Applied Intuition is working with Stellantis around STLA Brain, the company's software architecture designed to create a more modern electronic foundation across future vehicles. Stellantis also plans STLA Smart Cockpit for the in-car digital experience and STLA Auto Drive for advanced driver assistance and autonomous capability, with major elements expected to begin rolling out from 2027. Then there is one of the strangest pieces of the entire plan. Stellantis, autonomous driving company Wave, and Uber are working on Level 4 robot taxis. Level 4 autonomy means a vehicle can operate without a human driver in specific defined conditions. The pitch is simple. Stellantis knows how to manufacture vehicles at enormous scale. Wave brings autonomous driving software. Uber already has a giant ride-hailing customer network. Put those pieces together, and you have a potential path to deploying autonomous vehicles without requiring Stellantis to build every part of the ecosystem itself. That places a legacy automaker that was fighting a major market share crisis into the same broad conversation as Waymo, Tesla, and the rest of the autonomous mobility race. Ambitious does not even begin to describe it. But the most important part of this strategy may still be much simpler than artificial intelligence, robot taxis, or software platforms, because the clearest evidence that Stellantis understands its mistake came from the Ram showroom. For the 2025 model year, Ram removed the 5.7-liter Hemi V8 from the 1500 and replaced it with the Hurricane, a twin-turbo inline-six. On a specification sheet, the Hurricane made sense. It could deliver excellent power while improving efficiency. Engineers could defend it with numbers all day. But trucks are not purchased only through spreadsheets. For a significant portion of Ram's audience, the Hemi was part of the truck's identity. The sound mattered, the character mattered, the history mattered. Customers had associated that V8 with Ram for roughly 2 decades. So when Stellantis brought the 5.7 Hemi back, the response became a perfect demonstration of Filosa's new philosophy. Around 10,000 orders arrived immediately on the first day, and within 6 weeks, orders reportedly passed 50,000. That is not nostalgia appearing in a focus group. That is real money entering a real order system. Filosa has used the Hemi response as evidence of a broader lesson. Stop designing the entire company around what executives think customers should eventually prefer. Pay attention to what customers are actually buying now. And that logic is spreading across the portfolio. Jeep is preparing a new Cherokee for North America, internally associated with the KM program, on a fresh architecture with a turbocharged hybrid system. That gives Jeep another way to reduce fuel consumption without forcing a buyer into a full battery electric vehicle. At the same time, Jeep is still moving ahead with electric products such as the Recon. The difference is that the company also plans combustion-powered alternatives around important nameplates, rather than assuming the electric version has to replace everything else. A sportier 2-door Wrangler derivative, reportedly called Scrambler, has also been discussed for buyers wanting something more enthusiast-focused. Ram's plans extend well beyond the Hemi. The brand is expected to add a full-size SUV, continue with vehicles such as the Rampage and Dakota in relevant markets, and revive a mid-size ProMaster City cargo van aimed at commercial customers and small businesses. Dodge, which spent years looking like a brand trapped between its muscle car past and an uncertain electrified future, is also expected to receive meaningful product investment. Plans include a full-size SUV and a new performance model referred to as Copperhead, an obvious attempt to reconnect Dodge with the buyers who still associate the badge with speed, attitude, and dramatic engines. Chrysler may need the turnaround even more. For years, the Pacifica minivan has carried an extraordinary amount of responsibility because Chrysler's lineup became almost non-existent. Under the new direction, the brand is expected to gain 2 smaller crossovers with Fiat connections plus a larger SUV. Whether those products become hits is another question, but having an actual range of vehicles would already be a dramatic improvement over asking one minivan to sustain an entire historic American brand. Meanwhile, Stellantis is not abandoning affordable EVs. In Turin, Italy, the Mirafiori plant is planned to support a new dedicated electric platform beginning around 2028, underpinning at least 2 and potentially 3 higher-volume electric vehicles. Stellantis has discussed pricing around €15,000, roughly $17,000. If it can genuinely deliver an EV near that level, that matters because one of the biggest obstacles to mass-market electric adoption remains price, and this is where the new Stellantis strategy becomes much more coherent than it first appears. Bringing back a Hemi and building a €15,000 electric car are not contradictions anymore. They are expressions of the same idea. Different customers want different things. A pickup buyer in Michigan, a city driver in Turin, a family shopping for a hybrid Jeep, and an Uber passenger stepping into a robotaxi do not need the same powertrain, the same platform, or even the same ownership model. Stellantis is trying to serve all of them, rather than choosing one future and demanding everyone move into it. For buyers, that shift has immediate implications. If you are shopping for a Ram or Jeep over the next several years, those brands sit directly in the center of the investment plan. More products, quicker development, and broader powertrain choice should make those showrooms much more competitive if Stellantis executes properly. And execution is the enormous qualifier here. $70 billion does not guarantee success. 60 models can become 60 opportunities or 60 expensive mistakes. Shared platforms can improve margins, but rushing development can create quality problems if management becomes too obsessed with speed. Partnerships can lower costs, but they also create dependency. Autonomous driving can become a huge business or consume billions before generating meaningful profit. Stellantis still has to prove that this reset works in factories and dealerships, not just in investor presentations. Dodge and Chrysler loyalists finally have reasons to pay attention because those brands are supposed to receive genuinely new products rather than another cosmetic update stretched across an aging platform. European buyers should watch the affordable EV program because success around €15,000 could pressure competitors throughout the continent. Even people with no intention of purchasing a Stellantis product should watch what happens next, because this company is becoming a giant real-world experiment in how legacy automakers respond when a rapid all-electric transition runs into slower, messier consumer behavior. That is the broader importance of this story. For years, many executives treated electrification almost like a one-way countdown. Battery costs would fall, regulations would tighten, consumers would adapt, and combustion vehicles would fade. Stellantis planned aggressively around that expectation. The problem was not necessarily the direction. The problem was treating the timing as guaranteed. Customers do not buy 5-year strategy slides. They buy the vehicle sitting in front of them based on price, range, capability, convenience, emotion, and what works for their lives right now. Some customers are ready for EVs. Some want hybrids. Some still want gasoline. Some Ram buyers very clearly wanted a Hemi. Under Tavares, Stellantis increasingly behaved like the company should determine the destination, and customers would eventually catch up. Under Filosa, Stellantis is trying something almost embarrassingly obvious. Give people options and watch what they choose. That is why the Hemi order surge matters more than the engine itself. 50,000 orders in roughly 6 weeks became a symbol of what happens when a giant corporation finally reverses a decision its own customers had been complaining about. The $70 billion Fastlane plan takes that lesson and applies it across 14 brands, multiple continents, and nearly every major propulsion technology available. Gasoline engines remain, hybrids expand, plug-in hybrids and range extenders expand. EVs continue. Affordable EVs become a priority in Europe. Software gets modernized. Robot taxis become a long-term bet. Chinese partnerships help fill technology and manufacturing gaps. Jaguar Land Rover and Tata could help share development burdens. Jeep, Ram, Peugeot, and Fiat get most of the investment, while Dodge and Chrysler receive desperately needed new products. None of this looks like an automaker abandoning the future. It looks like an automaker admitting there may be more than one future. And that may be the biggest strategic change of all. Stellantis did not kill electric vehicles. It killed the idea that every customer should be pushed toward electric vehicles on the same schedule. After collapsing sales, dealer frustration, leadership upheaval, and a painful loss of market share, the company has decided that choice itself may be the competitive advantage. Now the only question is whether Stellantis recognized that lesson early enough. $70 billion gives Filosa an enormous toolbox, but competitors are not standing still. Chinese automakers continue getting faster. Toyota and others remain formidable in hybrids. Ford and General Motors are fighting for American truck buyers. Tesla still defines a huge part of the EV conversation. Waymo is already putting autonomous vehicles on public roads. Stellantis is attempting to fight across all of those fronts simultaneously. If the company succeeds, the Hemi comeback may be remembered as the small moment that revealed a much larger transformation. If it fails, this $70 billion reset could become one of the most expensive attempts at corporate rehabilitation the auto industry has ever seen. Either way, the era of Stellantis betting everything on one electric future appears to be over. And for Jeep, Ram, Dodge, and Chrysler buyers who spent the last several years wondering whether the company was still building vehicles for them, that change may matter more than any single new model. So where do you stand? Was Stellantis right to bring back customer choice and the Hemi? Or do you think slowing the all-electric push risks leaving the company behind? That answer will probably define far more than one automaker's future, because every major car company is watching the same customers, facing the same technology transition, and trying to figure out exactly how fast the market really wants to change.